Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bracy Sports Media. My name is Aaron Bracy, and I'm thrilled to be joined today by John DiCarlo. John is a journalism professor at Temple University. He is the editor of owlscoop.com and a former sports reporter for Gannett newspapers. John, thanks so much for joining us on Bracy Sports Media.
Aaron, thanks for doing this. This is really fun. Already, I see some familiar faces out there. There are some very talented and very smart people joining in on this conversation. So I appreciate them being here. This is cool. Thanks for doing this.
And thanks everyone for joining us today. If you like our videos, you can download our videos wherever you get your podcasts, Bracy Sports Media. You can watch us on YouTube, Bracy Sports Media, and check out our website, bracysportsmedia.com. All right, John, I'd like to ask you the first question because in today's media climate, a lot of different things are happening. When you have students in your class, what advice do you give to students who are looking to pursue sports journalism?
Number one, to not give up on it if they're passionate about it. Number two, just to be the best reporter they can be. So much is being asked of them now, and I get that. They have to be as proficient as they can be. They're asked to do more than I was asked to do when I was in college. You have to be proficient on social media. You have to be comfortable in front of the camera. You have to learn how to write. You have to learn how to work a beat. But it really does come down to good old-fashioned reporting. And I tell my students a lot of times, like, let's keep this simple before we can make it complicated. You can be great on camera, but if you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to be wasting people's time, and you will make mistakes. And covering a college beat can be challenging. Covering a high school beat can be challenging. And covering pro beats is challenging. You know that. You've covered a little bit of everything here. So just to really, really, really hone their skills as reporters. And if you do that, I usually tell them I can almost guarantee you that you know, can't guarantee them a job right away, but can guarantee you that other things will follow suit. I think sometimes students get things backwards, and you know, if you have your own radio show, your own TV show, your own column in the paper, you have to provide context. You have to have information. But I tell them you'll be surprised of what the type of information that you can relay and the type of context that you can provide as a college journalist, even a high school journalist, as an intern. So reporting matters more than anything. And then we talk about fairness too. It's hard to be objective. I don't think true objectivity is possible anymore. Even when I worked in Vineland, New Jersey, an area that I have no ties to whatsoever, and I really don't have too many ties to South Jersey, but when I was out there, people would say, "Oh, where are you from? Where are you from? Where are you from? Oh, you're from. Oh, you must be from Vineland. You're biased." It's like, I'm not, but you do get attached to the students, the student athletes that you cover. I think most of us, unless we're completely miserable, hateful people, you like to see people do well. And it's cool to see a high school win a state championship. But you just have to strive to be fair. So I talk a lot about fairness, a lot about just honing your skills as a reporter, and just being passionate about it. This stuff will not come easy, especially in today's economy. But it wasn't much easier when we got started either. A different set of challenges. But you know, and some of my colleagues at Temple who are on this call, and some people I know on this call can attest to this. There's so many talented people out there, but I still think it boils down to, if you really do want this, be passionate about it and give it a shot, because the skills are also transferable too. You can get into a lot of different types of media with these skills that you acquire.
That's great advice, John. All right, let's go right out to our questions. Kevin, go ahead, unmute yourself. Kevin has a question for you, John.
Yeah, so first, thanks, Aaron and John, for holding this. I appreciate it. But my question, it's a little bit selfish, but I think it's going to help everyone else in here as well, help provide some value. It's really, as a recent college graduate during this economic downturn, how can you differentiate yourself and really stand out when applying for journalism jobs?
That's a great question. A couple of things. I think that, I hope this comes across well. I think be easy on yourself, and that might sound kind of like it's working against what you'd want to do. But I think that employers, I can't speak for every single editor, station manager out there, I think, or at least hope, they know what you guys are going through. So if you don't have a job right away, I think they get that. When we graduated, the economy was better, and it was like, oh, you have this gap of 7 months on your resume. What's wrong with you? Or you did a stint with a PR agency, or you did a stint outside of journalism. I don't know about you. It's not that way anymore. just try to learn as much as you can about wherever you're applying. And it is hard. I'm sure, Matt Fine is on this call. He could tell you this. Lauren teaches at Temple and has worked in so many different facets of communications. It's hard to get somebody's attention. And that's what you're trying to do. There's no such thing as a perfect cover letter, and networking can be uncomfortable, but just differentiating yourself it can be a lot of things. It could be reaching out to somebody and saying, hey, I just want to introduce myself. I know you don't have any openings there right now, but if anything ever did come available, I'd love to have a conversation with you, learn more about what you do. And if they see that you're not going to them, it's almost kind of like sales. You're selling yourself. Obviously, if there's an opening, you go after it and apply for it. But sometimes it's like looking for an apartment. You want to get to it before it's listed, or, going after a house or something. Just reaching out to them and saying, hey, I'd love to know more about what you guys do. If anything ever came up, whether it's part-time, full-time, I'd love to be considered for, but do as much research, because sometimes they will say to you, hey, well, they might turn it on you just to test you. Hey, what do you think of our coverage? You don't want to be caught flat-footed and say, oh, I think it's great. Or, you don't want to rip them to shreds either, but know something about their coverage area, because again, I can't speak for every employer out there, but a lot of them are looking for ideas and they know that they need young ideas. So if you show them that you've done some sort of research, they're probably going to be impressed with that, even just a little bit impressed. You want to make a positive impression. You want to be high energy, low maintenance, show them that you've done your research, show them that you know a little bit about their coverage area and what they do, and be okay with the fact that you might just be looking for a conversation, and you hope that conversation will lead you to the next conversation. And try to be, as tough as it is, try to be as emotionally intelligent as you can be. Don't try to push the envelope too much. If you're talking to somebody and you're trying to make a good first impression, and you know that they don't have an opening right now and you can tell that they're busy, don't be afraid to say, hey, I'll let you go. Just want to introduce myself. I'd love to catch up with you again at some point. And that's not easy, because you want a job. You need a job. We need money. We need experience. We need those things. But if you can leave a good first impression and somebody walks away and they say, talk to that kid, Kevin, he gets it. We don't have anything right now, but I'm going to keep him in mind. You'd be surprised. People will think of you. They'll think of you the next time. And so a lot of it is just, and probably none of that really sounds like sage wisdom, but it's just settling yourself and thinking of those things and thinking, what would they want out of me? But just doing as much research as you can about that media outlet, whether you're working for a newspaper, TV station, radio station, or if you're looking to get into organizational communication, like working for a team. Hey, I studied your fan base a little bit. I studied your social media. Have some ideas if you'd ever want to hear them. Come to the table with something, even if you're not getting a job interview. Those little things help. Even if you don't have the job right away, or even if you don't have an interview right away, it could lead you to something when you least expect it.
And John, if you didn't know, Kevin also has an asset in his voice. He's trying to get into broadcasting, and he has a great voice for broadcasting. Kevin, Thanks for your question. Let's go to James. James, you have a question for John.
I do, but I also wanted to add to Kevin's point when he said,
absolutely.
Let's see, how do you sell yourself to a certain outlet? You see, my problem is that most of my media on my reel is in English, and I have like a very good bilingual background in which my Spanish approach to sports is also very good, and there's a market outside of New York, in California, in Texas, in Florida, but I have no content in Spanish. So how could I attract those kind of employers if I don't have content in Spanish, if that's the sort of journalism that I'm going for?
James, I'm going to tell you right now, you are in a very good position in being bilingual. Really? Again, I wish I could guarantee you a job right now. I can't, but you have an advantage. You have an advantage right away. I have seen, I've been in professional locker rooms before. I've been in college situations where you don't forget that athletes, they get sick of hearing the same questions, and they may say that I don't read stuff. I stay out of the newspapers. If they're not reading it, somebody is reading it to them, and they do pay attention to who's asking them questions. I have seen reporters go up to pro athletes, college athletes, coaches, and be ignorant of the fact that they may not be comfortable speaking English. And then I've seen a reporter go up and approach them and speak to them in Spanish. Don't forget that this is a people business. We're taught sometimes, or we get this impression in the media. I talk to my students about this too. Yes, be fair, be accurate, be diligent, but it doesn't have to be this us against them thing. And sometimes I think older reporters too, but younger reporters think it's us against them. It's still a people business, and you're still communicating with somebody. I've seen on several occasions where an athlete is approached by somebody and they make an effort to speak to them in Spanish, their whole disposition changes and they open up to them. And you have that ability, but that can serve you in pro locker rooms. It can serve you in communities. My first job, my first and only full-time job in newspapers was with a paper called the Daily Journal. It's a Gannett paper in South Jersey. Got to cover high school stuff, college stuff, pro stuff. And, but I covered, covering high schools and covering the community was a big part of it. And there was a large Puerto Rican population in South Vineland. And they were very, rightfully so, very wary of the media and thinking, my former sports editor came in and wanted to revamp our coverage and say, we put too many just AP stories up there for pro sports. We're not doing a good enough job of covering this community. And getting to know that community, I came in as a blank slate. And a lot of people in South Vineland were wary of the media. And they would say to me sometimes, reporters don't know how to approach us. They don't know. Reporters in the past have walked up to my son, who's a junior in high school, and we just moved here, and you can tell that they get flustered when they're getting short responses from my kid. And this is only his second year speaking English here, and we feel like we're not treated fairly. And I would just listen and kind of soak that in like a sponge. I'd think, damn, I wish I could speak Spanish. I should have learned before I got this job, but I had to pivot and take the job. That will matter so much more than you think. Another story I'll share with you very quickly. This wasn't my story, but a guy that worked at our student newspaper years ago, his name's Chris Silva. He worked for the Detroit Free Press for a long time, or a while before he got out of the business. His parents are from Puerto Rico, and he was raised in America, but he spoke Spanish fluently. So the Free Press sent him to cover spring training one year. And this is during the days when Vladimir Guerrero was one of the best players in the game. And Chris had not covered spring training before, and Vlad wouldn't talk. He could talk a little bit more than he would let on, but his default was, he would say, I can't speak English. And reporters were kind of, from what Chris would tell me, they would just get frustrated. Chris goes up to him, just starts shooting the breeze with him. He opened right up to Chris. He had never spoken to him before, but he appreciated the fact that he was making the effort. And I remember Chris calling me up and saying, holy crap, I got an interview with Vlad Guerrero. I said, how'd you do it? He's like, I spoke to him in Spanish. And he appreciated that. So that is a huge, huge asset for you, both professionally and genuinely. So do not overlook that. I would do some research. That there are a lot of media outlets out there. I would hope they're looking for Spanish-speaking reporters. A lot of communities in Philadelphia who need it. That will serve you well. So just try to do your research and see. Just examine the communities they're covering, whether it's sports, news, entertainment. That will absolutely separate you from somebody else. So I think you have a gift there that you're going to be able to use professionally in building sources and writing. You have an edge over your peers there.
One quick thing to add there, James, before we go to Brett, is every major league team requires one of their public relations officials to be Spanish speaking so that they can translate to any of the Spanish speaking players. So great question and great asset that you have. Let's go to Brett. Brett, you have a question for John. Go ahead.
I want to thank Aaron for letting me join this. I saw on Twitter today, and John's a good friend, and I work in a similar field. I'm a college media advisor, and that's actually where my question lies. But so anytime John talks, I listen. So I recommend anybody else do the same today.
And vice versa.
Well, my question is tied to the industry as a whole. We've seen a lot of, obviously, evolution in the news media in the last 3 months, but sports media in the last 2 weeks took a major hit with the changes at The Athletic and some of the layoffs. And you and I both do some of the same things. We have a professional day job. That's our full-time job. And luckily it has to do with journalism and media, but we also get our fix as sports journalists on the side. How do you recommend to up-and-coming sports journalists to understand how to balance a full-time job with the passion component as they want to grow, possibly to have a full-time job in sports? So for example, if they're their day job may not be exactly what they want to do forever, but it pays the bills. How do you promote that balance? I struggle with it to this day. So you've done it a lot longer than I have. So I'm curious on that, because I'm going to imagine a lot of our up and coming students going into the professional world are going to be doing that. They're going to be piecemealing opportunities until the right fit comes along.
Brett, it's a great question. It is like, you know what? I thought I was good with the balance, and then you gain some other perspectives and you think, okay, I need to learn how to balance it out better. My full-time job at Temple, advising the student radio station, WHIP, advising our yearbook, Temple, and advising the Temple News, they all keep you pretty busy because they do a great job, and teaching keeps you busy, and I'm fortunate to do it. And then this Owl Scoop is not my full-time job. If I was working in a college town where we had great advertising revenue and we weren't in a pro sports town, I probably could do it as my full-time job, but it can feel like a full-time job. But you do have to work to find balance, because it might start with, we don't cover every road game. If Temple's playing Tulsa and they're at Tulsa in the middle of the week, I would have to take vacation time from my full-time job at Temple. And then you have to weigh the positives and negatives and think, they're a 500 team right now. And this might sound cruel, but it's not going to be cost effective for us to go down there. We'll go cover a bowl game, but you have to think of, where am I going to invest my resources? Even if I'm very passionate about doing something, you have to give thought to that. But I also am very, very lucky. We have my assistant editor, Kyle Gauss, also works. He doesn't work for Owl Scoop full time, but he's a great researcher. He's a great writer. He's a great reporter. He helps me out. And our interns have been incredible. One of them, Adam Cornell, is on this call right now. He helped us out immensely with our draft coverage. Went right down the line, called Sean Bradley, called Chappelle Russell, called Matt Hennessy, called all the undrafted rookie free agents. So that's 8 guys from a class. And I didn't have to do any of those stories, because Adam just had the right attitude and said, what do you need me to do? What do you need me to do? So I've been very fortunate there. But it is a tough balance, because if you're not mindful of it, it will catch up with you. And my wife's an incredibly understanding person. She's great, but I think we all go through this. You're on your phone, and she'll say to me, I wish you could see the look on your face when news breaks. And it could literally just be about something with recruiting. And that's honestly what drives a lot of our content, is recruiting. Aaron was talking about it just at the top of the call, saying, hey, one of his former students is Zach Hicks, a basketball player at Camden Catholic. I could write, Adam's probably heard me say this before, some of my students have heard me say it before, I could write what I think is the most beautifully written piece on Aaron McKee, and it might perform decently. But if Adam came to me and said, hey, I bumped into Zach Hicks out in South Jersey, he told me he's going to commit to Temple tomorrow, he gave that to me and just said, I got to attribute it to a source, no one would give a damn about my story. They would all run to Adam's story, because it's the what's next piece of sports. But to find that balance in my life, you need good people around you. So I don't know that I have the perfect answer, other than you do. I do really think that all of us have to consider that and think, okay, if this is my 9-to-5 day job, what can I get done? How am I going to plan out my day? You're right. It's not easy, because you're passionate about what you're doing on a freelance basis, but you have other responsibilities. And I don't know. I mean, if you have the opportunity to hire some interns and hire some freelancers, they can really help, and just kind of identifying what their strengths are and where they can help you out. But I don't know. I don't know if I have the perfect answer there for you, because it's something I talk to my wife about. There are bowl games I haven't covered over the past couple of years, because I've said I've done that before. And sure, if there's I went this year to cover the Military Bowl, and Annapolis is great, but it's a 2.5-hour drive. And it was a fun trip. We were up and back in the same day. 2 years ago, as much as I love covering college football, I know it sounds terrible to say for young journalists, I had zero interest in flying to Shreveport, Louisiana, 2 days after Christmas to go cover Temple in the Independence Bowl. Watch Daniel Jones on TV, shred him up. It was a fun game to watch, but I kind of just picking and choosing your moments. And I know you've gone through that too. You're incredible at your job at Arizona. Your students are lucky to work with you. And now you're covering hockey. You have to be on all the time. And it is a lot. So I don't know. I don't know that I have the perfect answer for it. I've had the pleasure of meeting your wife. You guys are amazing. So it's you it is figuring out how much time am I devoting to my friends and my family, how much time am I devoting, and you have to have understanding family members, and maybe try to figure out where you can hire interns or ask for help where you can get it.
John,
Can I follow this up real quick?
Yeah,
here?
go ahead, Brett. Absolutely.
I'm sorry. How about from just the encouragement standpoint for students to know that, the full-time permanent job may not come right away. And I don't say that in a negative way. I say that because we're seeing such a disbursement now. I want to keep the students I work with engaged and knowing that they have a place in this industry. What do you tell your students in the same realm, along the same lines of the balance we're talking about, to not get discouraged if, again, they're sort of piecemealing stuff together at first?
No, you're absolutely right. And I do tell them that. And I do tell them, just keep your feet moving, because it is not this black and white thing of like, you graduate, you either get a job or you don't. And people aren't going to, at least I think, aren't going to look you unfavorably if you don't have a full-time job right away. If you go to them and say, if you were sitting in a job interview and you say, I graduated from Arizona 7 months ago and I don't have a full-time job, but you know what I've been doing? I've been freelancing I've been working at a pizza place in Tucson during the day, but at night I've been covering, American Legion baseball, or in the fall I've been covering high school football, and I'm just keeping my feet moving. To me, that's okay. And it just shows that I would hope that people in this industry know, anybody who's sitting around in this industry, and if they were looking at a recent graduate like that and judging them, I think they're making a huge mistake. So I do tell them, like, it is okay if you don't get a full-time job right away. Keep freelancing, keep your feet moving. And I think people will understand that. And again, it might have been different. It might have been a different conversation when I graduated college a while back. So I do tell them, like, I don't think that's a bad thing. You can have a 9-to-5, but if you can find some time on the side to freelance, you might get a story from the AP might call you up. Hey, somebody got sick. Can you hop in and cover the Phillies on Saturday whenever we get baseball back? Or just, I tell them to look at all the rosters, the college rosters, for all the teams at their school where they recently graduated from. Look at where they're from. Call their hometown newspapers and see if they need a story done on them. Yeah, we don't want to fly anybody out there. Sure, we can use it. I do tell them, if you are working a 9-to-5, you're not bound to that 9-to-5 forever, but don't be stagnant and stop writing or stop. I know everybody thinks that they can start a podcast, but if you can start one and build up an audience, people will listen. So I tell them, as long as you keep your feet moving, as cliche as that sounds, you can still be in a good position. So I think you make a great point, because it is a conversation that we need to have with students now. If we're not having that conversation with them, I think we're tone deaf.
Great point, John. All right, we have time, I think, for one more question. We're going to go to Adam. Adam has a question for you, John. Or maybe a comment for his great work on the Eagles draft.
Yeah, no, thank you again for the credit, John. I just looking ahead to the future of sports journalism and just sports in general. Obviously, there's questions and plans in place for some of these sports returning, and like you just said, we don't even know about baseball right now. Is there any type of just based on your experiences and kind of looking ahead, is there any type of idea that journalism may switch even more? Like, obviously, over the past 5-10 years, you look at digital media really taking off and social media. Could that even go even further, maybe even more podcasting, just because of the fact that maybe there's limited media access even more, at least at first? Like, has that even crossed your mind, or just like in general, based on your experiences, that maybe there's even more direction change because of what's going on?
It's a great question. It's definitely crossed my mind on a couple of different fronts. Right now, access could be restricted. Todd Zalecki is a good friend of mine. I've talked to him about what it's going to be like if there is baseball this year, and whether he'll be covering games from home or whether he'll actually be on site. I hope that there is a way. I think there could be pluses and minuses to it. People could shift more toward podcasting, but I hope that those people who are doing it can still gain access to their beat, meaning talking to players, talking to coaches, talking to people in the know. Because if we continue to shift away, and obviously we have to be smart, we have to take care of ourselves and be healthy during a pandemic, but hopefully as things get closer to normal, whatever normal might be or healthy might be, sure, there might be some changes where fewer people go on the road and they might be covering games from home, but I still hope that they can hop on Zoom afterwards and talk to coaches and players, because if they don't, what perspective are they giving you? And I don't want to dismiss, there are some great blogs out there that cover teams that don't have access, and they may have a great perspective. And I know some pro beat writers who have said, hey, I really respect this person who runs this blog. They're not there, but I learned something from them. But yes, it could shift where there's more social media storytelling and there's more podcasting, but I still think that you have to give people something that they can't get anywhere else, or some sort of information or some sort of context. So, even as we have been, we can't cover spring football during the pandemic. There's no, I don't know what kind of access we're going to have to covering preseason camp in August. So we try to cover recruiting. We try to give people something, but I do think about it, because we think if people can say, oh, we can save money here, we can save money there by not sending people on the road, that might be the case. But I still hope that people can have access to whatever they're covering, because it might sound simple to say, but that's so incredibly important. Because if not, then you're kind of like that person who's just sitting at home in their living room, just ranting from their armchair. You might have a salient point, but if you can't talk to the coach or the player or, the 12th person on the bench, you're not giving them perspective. So I hope that we don't shift too far in the opposite direction and say, oh, what did we learn from this pandemic? We can cut budgets, we can cut this and cut that. We don't need to send people anywhere. We can just, do this all remotely. I think it'll make sense to do some stuff remotely. We've already seen people broadcasting games, and I think that's going to be done in some cases. They can broadcast road games from the studio, and they do a great job with it. But I hope at some point that people can still be on site. And I would encourage young journalists, if they don't have a job yet, or if they feel restricted about where they can go, try to cover your own community, try to find stories in your own community, and that might lead you to the next job. But I think it's a great question, Adam. I'm sure it's on a lot of people's minds. We'll have to see how it really goes.
John, great advice for aspiring journalists. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you didn't get to ask a question, or if you're listening to our podcast and you like some more, you can follow John on Twitter at JDiCarlo. I'm sure John will be happy to answer any questions you have. And if you like our podcast, please download them wherever you get your podcasts, Bracy Sports Media. And thanks a lot for joining us, everyone. We'll see you again next Thursday night from 8 to 8:30 for our Bracy Sports Media live Q&A. John, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, everybody. A lot of great people. I haven't met all of you yet, but there are a lot of talented people out there asking questions. I appreciate all of it. This was really fun. This was awesome. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us, and have a great night. Bye-bye.